of the things I learned, especially when we started doing strip-till and banding, it almost seemed like the poorer environment you were on, the better that thing worked. You didn't have the heavy clays, you didn't have the heavy mags, you didn't have the heavy CECs, the high organic matters. It just, everything could work in harmony so much better without having these, what I call them, out of balance variances in fields. So it's funny how a guy thinks, I can remember thinking, my whole life, growing up and hearing my grandfather and my dad and friends talk about, if we just farmed, in central Illinois or northern Illinois. And
why didn't the mule make it another 100 miles before it died?
Now I'm sitting back looking at it going, I don't know if we want to be doing that or farming that with what we're doing now, because it's a lot drastic different world to learn, I work with a lot of growers all over the U.S. and, I pretty much, about every single time somebody tells me where they're from and I say, well, I don't know where that is, I'm sorry. And I said, I just point to a map and I'll point to Indianapolis and I'll say, here, are you above this or below it? And they'll know, we're above it. And I said, you got a mag problem then. We know how to fix that. And so if you're below that, I said, you might have some other issues we got to take a look at. So.
Sure, exactly. But it's just like I remember 30 years ago when we got away from 30-inch soybeans, and at that time went to 15s. The poorer the dirt, the more response we got.
Yeah.
Where we got into our really good dirt, we didn't need 15s to keep up.
Yeah.
That ground took care of itself. That needed to be corn on corn ground.
And see, now I didn't want to go buy a bean planter, so I got 30-inch row beans this year. So we'll see how that works out. If I could just make it work strip-tilling them, my life would be so much better.
Why not?
We just haven't had any luck. We could run the bar from a tillage standpoint, but as far as banding fertilizer in front of soybeans, we've seen a bushel here, a bushel there, but it's nothing that's just been, a home run.
And we have got started doing some of that years ago, back when I was still 30-inch row corn and beans before we switched over to 20s. And the guy that I had building strips for me, we went in one year and they strip-tilled my corn stalks, and I put beans in on top of them. Extremely happy the way it went. 2 years later, we were back on the same farm, and we just couldn't get the residue to go through the machine, and that was it. Trying to do fall strips, in late October, and we've not really tried it since. We're really in our 20-inch rows trying to develop that 20-inch strip of some sort, so we're not going in and just strictly no-tilling beans into standing corn stalks. We're trying to size up the residue a little bit, and we're playing around with a couple of things, but we'd like to get back to that banded fertility for our beans at the same time. We think that's really paid off for us.
That's it's funny you mentioned that 20-inch. I was about this close to buying a 20-inch row corn planter this morning on an auction. There was a 1795 20-inch exact emerge, and I thought that would fit well here, but I just didn't have the guts to pull the trigger on it.
You just couldn't do it, could you?
No, and I love the concept. So right now, I've got a 30-inch row, 16-row corn planter, exact emerge, hydraulic downforce. I mean, it's got everything you can put on one or have on one. We're running 2x2x2. I've got it coming on both sides in the ground. I've got it coming out the back. I've got it in furrow, and we can hit it everywhere.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I just take that next step and go ahead and get a 20-inch row bar, and then have a 20-inch row planter, now the corn and bean thing's a whole lot easier.
And that is the nice thing about doing 20s on everything.
Then I got to trade off a new corn head for a 20-inch row corn head.
And you don't just go find a nice 1 or 2 year old 20-inch corn head.
No, you don't. I think it's the future. I truly do, especially when this short corn comes out.
With short corn, it's going to...
When short corn comes out, you will be able to go to high population, high density. I mean, I'm talking, high 40, low 50,000 populations in corn.
Yeah.
Really shrink them up, be able to control it better in wind events, and really start hitting your stride on yield.
And I think one of the things we see with our 20-inch rows is our yields haven't, really just been huge exponentially, but at least we think we're growing a lot better stalks. We think we're growing more organic matter. And if we can keep growing more organic matter, we're hoping that reflects back to, let's keep everything working better in the ground and help ourselves out. Now, I like the idea that when I go through, you may have 9 inches of space between every corn stalk. I'm looking at 10 or 11 inches. Mm-hmm. So in theory, it's great. We do feel that we're raising a lot better stalk quality now than what we did
it'd be understandable.
At that time.
We're, usually my average seed placements were about 5'2", about 5.4 inches. And that's on 38.5 for plant pop. But
and we can be in that 10 at 36.
Yeah. So and that's
or somewhere in that area.
It's definitely a positive. I wouldn't argue that none.
Yeah.
The 20-inch row corn is actually how I got kind of started with banding. We was actually at University of Illinois with Dr. Below, and I took a group of growers up there. And Fred was really trying to figure out 20-inch row corn to help seed companies from a placement standpoint, which hybrids liked it better than others. And it made sense. Like my wife, God bless her, I love her to death, but she hates to be on an elevator when there's a bunch of people. Okay, so it's a human psyche thing, right? Well, is it possible a plant could have that? It's amazing some of the characteristics in nature that shares when you think about the symbiotic relationships with things. So I got thinking, maybe it's not a plant thing up top that they don't like. Maybe it's a root thing down below they don't like. And through a lot of work and research, Fred was kind of able to come to some conclusions, but I'll never forget it. We had a group of farmers there, and they're all looking at leaf structure and plant architecture and everything. And here I am army crawling across the ground, and I'm sitting here looking at the fruits. And Fred comes up and he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I don't think the problem's up there. I think the problem's down here." And he said, "Really?" So we got to looking at that more. So we all left that day. I went home, and I just thought about that for a while. And I thought, if plants don't mind touching each other, or plants do mind touching each other, that tells me that some of those plants may have a different reaction if you put fertility to them. So that's how we started the strip-till by hybrid trials.
Okay.
So what we would do down here is we would band a hybrid, and then right beside it, we would conventional farm. So you would have 8 rows of banded, 8 rows not. And the results were just incredible. There would be some hybrids, there would be no difference. None. Didn't matter what you did.
Some of them, the roots didn't want to work that hard to get to where they wanted to eat.
Correct. And there'd be other ones that'd be 50, 60 bushel difference. Just from me to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow. And then you could repeat this, which was even cooler because it was like, all right, this wasn't a fluke. We've done this quite a few times now. And that's literally what led to the beginning of us strip tilling, to be honest. Once the growers started to see that and they were able to go out and touch the plots and see the plots that we did down here in southern Indiana, I told everybody, I said, I think there's something to this. I'll take the risk on the first bar, and hopefully you guys will get comfortable enough, and you guys will be buying your own bars in a few years. And that part didn't work out too well with